We just stepped on their face with a hobnail boot and broke their nose. We just crushed their face.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another edition of the Glory UGA podcast, brought to you by the fine people at Alumni Hall. I am Tyler, and man, do we have some things to talk about today, guys. Now, this is usually the time of year as a host of a Georgia podcast where you got to get pretty creative. You kind of have to manufacture content because we're a couple weeks removed from spring practice. You're still a couple of months away from SEC Media Days, from the opening of fall camp. So to me, this is kind of like the deadest period of the entire offseason because you go back to like January, February, you're still talking a little bit recruiting. You're still looking at the guys that are out there in the transfer portal, and you have guys that enter the transfer portal after their coach leaves. You got some things to talk about. But after spring practice, after that dies down, you got a couple months of not much going on, so you kind of have to get creative. Well, that's not the case today because we have not one, but two breaking news stories to discuss on the pod today, and also more than just a little dash of drama thrown in there as it pertains to the Georgia football program. So let's go ahead and dive in. And the first news story we got to start with here at the top is Christen Miller. We got to start there. This time yesterday, what time is it? It's about 6 o'clock, so maybe a little bit earlier than this time yesterday, we were all getting word that Christen Miller had somewhat surprisingly entered the NCAA transfer portal. We all had some thoughts on that. I had some thoughts. I shared those on social media. Some of you agreed with those. Some of you disagreed. Some of you vehemently disagreed with those, which is all good, man. It's all good. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. But we all had our thoughts on that, and some people were upset. Some were fine, whatever. But all the conversations surrounding Christen Miller's transfer, it was all for naught because, as I'm sure you all have seen by now, Christen Miller has reversed course and decided to return to the University of Georgia for his redshirt sophomore year. It's all a moot point talking about why he was going to leave, where he was going to go. None of that matters anymore. It's irrelevant. All that matters is that he is back in the fold here with this 2024 Georgia football team. And I personally think this is big time news. Now, one of the things I discovered yesterday through all the discussion about Christen Miller in the transfer portal was apparently not everyone is as high on Christen Miller as I am. Not everyone thinks as highly of him as I do. I am a guy that truly believes that Christen Miller has the potential to develop into one of the, if not the best defensive linemen on our team. I truly do believe that. I got a lot of pushback on that yesterday based off the tweet that I put out there. I tweeted out one thing, and I really didn't even think it was controversial. I certainly wasn't trying to be controversial. I wasn't intending to put that out as a hot take. Some people felt like I was overreacting, I was being dramatic, and some people felt that I was overstating how good Christen Miller was, which I can respectfully disagree with you. I think Christen Miller is very good, but again, apparently not everyone shares that. But I do have the actual tweet here. I'm sure most of you saw this. I know some of you did not, but I do want to read this tweet word for word so that we don't misconstrue what I said, because I think that's what happened last night. Some people kind of just read what they wanted to read and didn't really pay attention to exactly what I said, or they just intentionally misconstrued it. But here's what I said, word for word. Quote, "The Christen Miller news is a tough blow. No sugarcoating it. Potentially would have been our best interior defensive lineman this year. Everyone has their price, but this is the new norm in college football. You deal with it and find an answer. Your turn, Kirby. Go Dogs." I did not think that was controversial. I did not expect to get some of the pushback that I got on that. And it seems to me like what everyone, the biggest issue people had with that tweet was me saying that Christen Miller was our best interior defensive lineman. But again, that's misconstruing what I said. I'm going to emphasize the word potentially. Christen Miller, as everyone wanted to tell me last night, in no way was he the best defensive lineman we had last year. At no point did I say that yesterday. I've never said he was the best defensive lineman that was on the team last year. He was a redshirt freshman. However, based off what I saw from him last year, the flashes that I saw from him, certainly the improvement I saw from Christen Miller as the season progressed, and also in combination with what I saw from him a couple of weeks ago here in Athens at G-Day, I know it's a spring game, but he was going against a pretty damn good offensive line, right? And I thought he looked really good, and he also was not 100%. He's been banged up all spring. He's certainly been limited at times. He was out there at G-Day going with the number one defense, rotating in and out liberally with Warren Brinson, and he wasn't even fully 100%, and I thought he looked really good. I thought he looked like he was ready to take a step and be an even better player for us, a more consistent player for us this year. And that was the thing with Christen Miller. He was young. He wasn't consistent. He wasn't consistent with his technique. He flashed the skill set. The physical tools were there. We saw that on display. The elite first step quickness, the explosiveness. We saw the power, even in a pretty compact frame, about 300 pounds. We saw all of that. It was just the technical side of things that he needed to continue to improve on. So I felt like a guy that was a redshirt freshman last year. And by the way, also played 22% of our snaps last year defensively as a redshirt freshman. And Warren Brinson, who everyone wanted to tell me, or a lot of people were trying to tell me last night, well, I mean, he's the better player. He's a starter. Guys, I know that Warren Brinson's the starter. And I'm fairly confident Warren Brinson will start to open this season as well. Kirby Tibley defers to those seniors, the senior leaders on the team, especially a guy who is a fifth year, a super senior COVID guy. Same thing with Nazir Stackhouse. I fully expect those guys to start again this year. But at the same time, I also fully expect Christen Miller to see a significant bump in his snap count this year, because Christen Miller is going to be a better player for us this year than he was last year. And I do believe, I will stand by what I said. I'm not going to back off of it. I believe that Christen Miller has the potential, there's that word again, the potential to develop into the best interior defensive lineman on our team this year, based off what I saw from him last year, based off what I saw at G-Day. I've been very impressed with Christen Miller. I think there were times last year, and I did say this last year, there were times where I thought he was the most disruptive interior defensive lineman that we had in terms of getting in the backfield and disrupting what the offense was trying to do. He's got that quickness. He's got that athleticism, that explosiveness. Now, and that's also with him playing largely out of position last year. He was forced into duty behind Nazir Stackhouse to essentially back up Nas as our zero tech nose guard. And Christen Miller is 310 pounds. He is not a traditional zero tech, two gapping, space eating, double team eating nose guard, the way that Jordan Davis was and Nas Stackhouse is to a lesser degree, but that's still more so his game. He's really a three tech. That's really what he is. The issue is that's what Warren Brinson is. And Warren Brinson has the experiential edge on him. He has time in the program. He has the reps. He's more advanced technically as he was last year. So you kind of had to fill in Christen Miller where you could. Ideally, it would have been Jamal Jarrett, but Jamal Jarrett, as a true freshman, was simply not ready from a physical standpoint. Had to get his body in shape, had to drop some weight, had to reshape his body, had to get in condition. He wasn't ready to contribute last year. So Christen Miller it was, by default almost. He played a little three-tech, certainly later in the year when there was a little bit of an injury situation that Warren Brinson was dealing with. Christen Miller stepped in and played some more three-tech and played very well for us, mind you, in my estimation. But again, I go back to, I'm not saying at any point Christen Miller was better than Warren Brinson or better than Nas Stackhouse last year, although I do think Nas Stackhouse had a down year last year. He was much better in 22 than he was in 23, and he's admitted that as much himself. I expect him to have a bounce-back year this year. But here's the thing with those guys. When you look at two super seniors in Nas Stackhouse and Warren Brinson, when you're going from year 4 to year 5, you typically don't have that much room for improvement. You kind of more or less are who you are. I'm not saying you can't get better to some degree. Yeah, you can sharpen your game. You can polish your skill set. Sure. That is certainly the case. But a guy that's going from year 1 to year 2, and I know that he was a redshirt freshman last year, but from year 1 on the field actually playing snaps for us, meaningful snaps, to year 2, there's just typically a far greater improvement that guys make from year 1 to year 2 than you do from year 4 to year 5, because when you're in year 1, you're so much further away from what you're going to be, right? You're still very much in the developmental stage. And that's where Christen Miller was. I am fully expecting Christen Miller to take a big step this year. We need him to take a big step this year. And if what I saw at G-Day from him is any indication, he is poised to be able to take that big step. Will he be the best defensive lineman on the team this year? That remains to be seen. And again, I never said he was the best interior lineman on the team. I said he's got the potential to be if he continues to develop at a steady rate. Because I do think he has a higher ceiling than the guy like Warren Brinson. Because Warren Brinson, we know what Warren is. Warren's a really, really good player. A good, solid, valuable player for us on the interior of our defensive line. But Warren Brinson's not a game changer. He's not a Jalen Carter level guy. He never has been. He never will be. That's not who he is. And I'm not saying that Christen Miller is going to be Jalen Carter either. I don't think he has that kind of ceiling. But I have seen, although I do think there's a lot of similarities in Warren Brinson and Christen Miller's game. I think they're both more like one-gap guys, not our traditional two-gap guys that we tend to like to use. Now, we have altered what we do up front with our fronts quite a bit, and we're doing a little bit more one-gapping than we have, especially with those three techs than we've done in the past. And they're similar guys. They're both really good with their first-step quickness. They both have some explosiveness to their game. They have the ability to penetrate and cause disruption in the backfield. I just happen to think Christen Miller's a little bit more explosive. I think he's a little bit of a better athlete. Personally, that's just me. And I've said this many times. He reminds me of Tyler Clark. Tyler Clark, who played for us in the early years of the Kirby Smart tenure when we were doing a lot more two-gapping. We didn't let those guys one-gap as much. I think Tyler Clark was a quintessential one-gap interior three-tech defensive lineman, and I don't think we schemed to fit his skill set as much as maybe we could have. And we've evolved some defensively, and we don't do a ton of that, but we do more than we did back then. I think if Tyler Clark played for us this year, he would be even more effective than he was back in the early years of Kirby Smart's time here in Athens, although I think Tyler Clark was very, very good. And when I see, you guys know this, I've said this many times if you listen to the podcast, when I watch Christen Miller, I see Tyler Clark, and I know they have the same number, but it's beyond that, guys. It's their skill set, their strengths, even to the way they move out there on the field, the way they walk. I see a spitting image of Tyler Clark, and I think that Christen Miller has the potential to be the best lineman on our team, defensive lineman. I believe that he has that potential. Will he be? I don't know. We need to see it. He wasn't that last year, admittedly, but that doesn't mean he can't develop into that. And here's an example that I would use. Because what was continually thrown in my face last night was like, he's just a rotation guy. He's not even a starter. How can you say he's the best player on the team? Well, first off, I didn't say he was the best player. I said he could potentially develop into the best player. But what happened last year is last year. I really don't care what happened last year. That was 2023. I am more so focused on projecting forward to 2024. And in 2024, I believe absolutely there's a world where Christen Miller takes a big step forward and can maybe even elevate his game ahead of that of Warren Brinson and Nazir Stackhouse. Maybe not right away, but as the season goes on, he gets more and more reps. I could certainly see a world where that's possible. It's not inconceivable. Can we at least agree with that? It's not inconceivable. And here's a comparison I would make. And I'm going to stick with our defense. Pop Dumas-Johnson last year. Pop was a very good player for us. Did a lot of really good things for us. Was a big part of what we did to win that national championship in 2022. Good football player. But Pop in no way is as talented as a guy like C.J. Allen or Raylan Wilson or Jalen Walker. But you know what? Pop Dumas-Johnson was still starting over those guys last year. Let me ask you that question. This is a rhetorical question. Let me just pose it to you. Do you really think that Pop Dumas-Johnson is a better player, a more talented player than C.J. Allen or Raylan Wilson or Jalen Walker? Do you really think that? I don't. Pop Dumas-Johnson clearly didn't even think that because he left because he saw the writing on the wall. Not because he was a malcontent, not because he was looking for a big NIL payday. He left because he wanted to play, and he saw the writing on the wall with all the talent that we've stacked in that inside linebacker room. Those guys are just more talented than him. They have a higher ceiling than him. And as true freshmen, they were already eating into his snaps. He started, yes, and he was better than them, especially early last year, because he had that experience on them. He was just simply at a more advanced stage in his development. But if you give those guys, the younger guys, the C.J. Allens, the Jalen Walkers, the Raylan Wilsons of the world, if you give them a year or two of development where they actually can catch up in terms of their knowledge of the system and their technical prowess, well, physically speaking, they're just superior athletes. And when they catch up on the things that where Pop had an edge on them, the technique and the knowledge of the system, they're going to eat even more into his snaps, and who knows, maybe even eventually start over him. Now, although Kirby does like to defer to those veteran leaders on the team. And I see a very similar situation at the three tech. And I guess the defensive line in general, you can say zero tech as well, wherever Christen Miller fits in, he has some of that positional versatility. I know last year he was playing behind Nazir Stackhouse and Warren Brinson. I maintain, however, a lot like the situation inside linebacker, he had more physical gifts than those guys. I believe that. Now, the question remains, how much of a step will he take this year in catching up to those guys in terms of knowledge of the system, in terms of playing with proper leverage and technique, all those things you have to do, the little things, right, beyond just being a physical specimen out there. Those things remain to be seen. That's why I said potentially could develop into the best player on defensive line. I need to see him do it. I need to see him take steps in those areas before I can actually say, yeah, he's the best lineman on our team. But again, I don't think it's inconceivable. Just like it wasn't inconceivable last year to say, oh man, I think C.J. Allen's going to be better than Pop Dumas-Johnson. I mean, just watch. You saw that. Like, C.J. Allen wasn't ready last year. He was a young guy, made some mistakes, and didn't always know what was going on. But physically, you could see him. And even when Raylan Wilson got out there, you could see that they were more talented than Pop Dumas-Johnson. And Pop saw it too. And he knew what was going to happen once they started to figure things out and their head stopped spinning when they're no longer true freshmen. And I think you can say much the same thing about Christen Miller. And look, at the very least, even if you don't think that he has any chance to be the best interior lineman on our team, and that's fine. If you believe that, I respectfully disagree, but you're welcome to believe that. But even if that's the attitude you have about Christen Miller, you have to admit him coming back to Georgia is big for this team. And I'll go back to the other thing I said in that tweet. Some people had issue with me saying it was a tough blow. Like, how is it a blow if it's just a rotational guy, not even a starter? Well, guys, you watch Georgia football like I do. If you're listening to this right now, if you're watching this, you watch Georgia football like I do. You know how much we rotate along our defensive line. I don't care who it is. Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, all those guys rotated. Christen Miller played 22% of our snaps last year as a redshirt freshman. He was clearly going to play more this year. He was working liberally with the one defense and played well with the one defense in the spring game, and that is going to be the case throughout the season. He is going to play a lot for us. In fact, I kind of view him as somewhat of a co-starter. I know he technically, if he doesn't start, like, he's not going to be, only so many guys out there starting, but he's going to play essentially starter snaps in my estimation. I do believe that this year. So, like, me saying that it's a blow, what I mean by that is, we don't have a ton of proven options on the interior defensive line. Like, we know what we have in Isaiah Stackhouse, good, solid football player we can rely on. Same thing with Warren Princeton, good, solid football player that we can rely on. Neither guy's been a difference maker to this point, and I don't know if they ever will be. I don't think that's who those guys are, but that doesn't mean they're not good, valuable players. They are. But outside of that, who do you got? Well, you got Christen Miller. You got Jordan Hall, who I do think Jordan Hall, of all the guys in our defensive line room, I think he actually has the highest ceiling just based off what I saw from those two guys, Christen Miller and Jordan Hall last year. Christen Miller does have a year on him, so that matters. I thought Christen Miller was more advanced last year. And I think we'll see if Jordan Hall can catch up this year and take a bigger step, and be like that top guy off the bench in the defensive line, the number 3 defensive lineman. We'll see. But last year, I thought Christen Miller was better. I think that was pretty clear. I don't think there was really any question. I thought that both guys looked really good at G-Day. I thought Christen Miller looked a little bit better, to be quite honest with you. But those are the 4 guys I think you can say, all right, we know that those guys are going to be able to play for us. Like, we feel pretty good about those guys. Outside of that, who do you feel good about? Like, who do you know? Who do you know is ready to play? Jamal Jarrett? I think Jamal Jarrett can be really good. Like, he's a true zero-tech nose guard body for us. Like, he's a 350-plus guy. But he's got to show. We want him to be good. We think he can be good. And I think maybe even this year he could be good and play some snaps for us and be an impact-type player. But we don't know that, guys. Like, that's complete speculation. We have no way to know that because we haven't really seen him. We saw him a little bit in the Orange Bowl, a little bit. He looked good, admittedly. We saw him some against the number 2 offense, primarily at G-Day. Looked good, but wasn't dominant. And that was against, again, primarily the number 2 defense. So are you ready to have to count on him? What about Xavier McLeod, the guy we got from South Carolina? I'm high on his potential. I thought he did some good things at G-Day. I thought he flashed and showed some high-level potential. But he's even younger in his development than Jordan Hall and Christen Miller, because he only spent about half the year with South Carolina last year. He was dismissed from the team or left the team, whatever actually happened there, about midway through October. So he missed a ton of snaps, or reps at least, in practice. From a developmental standpoint, there was a stunting there of that development. So he's got to catch up. Or do you want to be in a position where you got to count on him to be ready? To me, it's like, if Xavier McLeod can give us something, that's gravy, baby. That's a luxury. I don't want to have to count on that. And I think we might have to rely a little bit more on Jamal Jarrett, because I think he is more of a true 3-tech or 0-tech guy. And Christen Miller will play some there too, but situationally, there are times where Jamal Jarrett might be more of the guy that you want to be on the field if you want to spell Nazir Stackhouse. Situationally, yes, Christen Miller can also factor into that spot as well. But if Christen Miller had left, which he, as of last night, he was going to, that left us with 3 guys. 3 guys that have really any sort of experience at the college level. And Jordan Hall, guys, ain't got a lot of experience at the college level. Played some last year, didn't play an overwhelming amount. Is that really the situation you wanted to be in going into the SEC schedule? Our schedule this year? The way that thing's shaped up? You really felt comfortable with that? I don't. So that's why I called it a blow. Now, let's also think about what I did not say. I did not say it was a debilitating blow. I did not say it was a death blow, because I didn't think that it was, because it's not. Christen Miller is a good player. I do think he has the potential to be the best or one of the better defensive linemen on our team, but he's not like a Jalen Carter type guy. He's not going to be that. So, even if Jalen Carter she missed some games in 2022. We were obviously not as good without him, but we were able to weather the storm. And we've seen guys at the receiver position, like George Pickens, you guys that they're big time players in our team. They go down. It's man, that sucks. How are we going to overcome that? And we've seen time and time again, we have answers, right? But this was a different situation at the defensive line spot. That's a critical position on our team. I've said this many times, and I know that you guys who have been long-time loyal listeners, you've heard me say this 5 billion times. I know we have some newer listeners. Let me just run through this again real quick. My thoughts on the defensive line and why it's so critical to our success. We have an incredible roster. Kirby has assembled one of the most talented rosters year in, year out in college football. That's been a massive part of our success. Maybe even, you could argue that that's the biggest reason. You had to have a talented roster like that. But if you want to narrow it down to a specific position, what position has been most important in our ascent to the top of the college football landscape? My assertion would be it's the defensive line, especially in 21 and 22, but certainly more so 21 when you got Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, and you got Devontae Wyatt. 22, you got Jalen Carter, and who is a freak, is a top 10 draft pick. But our defensive line, to me, has been the key to it all. Our defense, we know in 2021, to a lesser extent in 2022, but certainly in 21, was the driving force behind that run to the national championship. Our offense was better than people want to give it credit for, but let's make no mistake about it. That defense is what got us that national championship. Our offense made plays when they had to, and we're really good, but not on the level of our defense. Like, that was one of the better defenses in recent college football history. I think it's safe to say that. 22, our defense took a little step back, still really, really good, but our offense took a step forward. So we were kind of even offensively and defensively in 2022, but we still had Jalen Carter. And in the era of college football offense that we're in right now, the evolution of college offenses to how most offenses are spreading the field, most like non-Iowa offenses are spreading the field, trying to maximize space. That has put all sorts of conflict for defenses. It creates stress for defenses because you have to account for those guys who are now maximizing all that space on the field they used to never really even worry about it. Everything was condensed. All the bodies were smashed together. There's all this space out there that you just simply weren't using. When now offense, you realize, we can stress defenses if we use more space as we spread them out, and it makes it harder for them to defend the run. Because when you spread out to defend these receivers and these spread offenses, well, you have light boxes, right? You're going to have even numbers in the box. And most teams have trouble stopping the run with even numbers. A lot of these really good offenses, elite spread offenses, when you have even numbers in the box, they're going to gash you with the run. So if that's the case, at some point you have to stop that, right? You have to stop the run. Well, how do you stop the run? Well, you dedicate more bodies to the box. You have to outnumber the offense. That's what you have to do. You have to get a +1 scenario. But and that's fine, but when you do that, now you're where's that defender coming from? He's coming from coverage. So now you're messing with your structural integrity on the back end, and someone is going to be one-on-one. There's going to be an advantageous matchup for the offense somewhere, and they're going to find it, and they're going to exploit it. Why has Georgia, I know I use the Tennessee example a lot, but it's because we play them every year, at least recently and now, at least for the next year or two. But Tennessee has dropped 40 and 50 just about everybody they played, including the great Alabama, the great Nick Saban. They haven't done it to Georgia. Why? Because we've been so good up front. Our front six in general, yes, but specifically our defensive line. We have had difference makers up front. We have had dudes that disrupt, and they simply could not block them one-on-one. That's what it comes down to. We were able to defend the run with even numbers because they could not handle our interior defensive line. And that allowed us to keep a too high safety shell and be able to add help over the top to our cornerbacks and keep out of those one-on-one situations that Tennessee has made a living off of, like they did against Alabama. That's why Tennessee has not been able to get any traction against Georgia. It's because our defensive line has just been that good. Now, last year, our defensive line was not near as good, and our numbers against the run dropped precipitously. Now, it wasn't just the defensive line that was responsible for that. There's more than just the defensive line that goes into run fits, but our defensive line, in my estimation, was the biggest reason behind the dramatic drop-off we saw in our run defense production. I've read those numbers out to you guys. I don't want to waste the time here again today, but you go back and find the episode where I talked about this, and you got all the numbers out there that spelled out for you very clearly. Our run production dropped precipitously last year. In the Tennessee game, first play from scrimmage, they bust that long run, right? Now, that wasn't on the defensive line. That was more of a C.J. Allen thing, but they had more success running the football on us than they had on an efficiency standpoint than they had the previous 2 years because our defensive line wasn't as good. So that was my biggest concern coming to G-Day, coming to the season still. I felt better after G-Day, but when you have a guy like Christen Miller, who I thought was going to be a big part of our defensive line taking a step forward this year, when now he's in the transfer portal, well, yeah, that's kind of a blow, right? Because, who replaces that guy? You got to find a way to replace that production somehow. When George Pickens went down, okay, A.D. Mitchell, you're up. You're going to play a little bit more. And A.D. Mitchell, wasn't George Pickens, but he did some good things for us. Lad McConkey, you're up. You're going to have to step up. Lad really burst onto the scene. So we had some guys that were ready, and also a guy named Brock Bowers, right, who we didn't really quite know about. We didn't know he's going to be that good in 2021 going into the season, but he ended up being that dude. So it was all good. We had the guys to replace the lost production of George Pickens. But my question would be now, if Christen Miller had left, who do we have ready to step in and replace that production that Christen Miller was going to offer us? Again, Jamal Jarrett? Maybe, but do you really want to count on that? Xavier McLeod? Maybe, but do we want to count a guy that was with a program for half a year last year? Really? Do we want to count that? Do you want to count on true freshmen? We got some talented true freshmen like Nnamdi Aboko in this class, but you want to have to count on true freshmen in the trenches in the SEC? I'm not saying it's impossible, but that's extraordinarily rare. To me, anything you get from a guy in the trenches as a true freshman, that's gravy, baby. That's a luxury. You don't count on that. You do not want to be in the position to count on that. Teams that are in the position of having to count on true freshmen on the lines of scrimmage are typically not national championship contenders. So yeah, that's why I felt like it was a blow. Not that we couldn't possibly recover from it. There wasn't an answer. We still couldn't be good on the defensive line. I just didn't think that we were going to be as good on the defensive line when you lose one of your top 4 guys who's going to be a key contributor on the defensive line. That's the way I felt about that. So that's why I said it was a blow, not a death blow, not something that we couldn't recover from, but we were going to have to try to find an answer. Maybe it was a transfer portal, maybe the guy like Derek Harmon, although the guy from Michigan State, but there's not really a ton of options out there. And I'm not even sure Derek Harmon would be as good as I think Christen Miller is going to be for us this year. So I'm very, very glad that Christen Miller is back in the fold. I think that is a very, very good thing for this Georgia defense. I do expect our defensive line to take a step forward this year. And it's not, again, not so much because of Nas Stackhouse and Warren Brinson. Those guys, like, we know what they are. But it's the young guys. And Christen Miller is one of those young guys. Christen Miller, Jordan Hall in particular. Then maybe to a slightly lesser degree, you've got Jamal Jarrett and Xavier McLeod. How much of a step are those young guys ready to take? Because they're the guys that actually have more of the room to improve and to grow and to raise the level of their game. And if they were able to do that, then our defensive line would be ready to take a step forward. And I think we saw that at G-Day. I think we saw towards the tail end of last year. I think Christen Miller is ready to take a big step this year. I think Jordan Hall is ready to take a step this year. So as long as those guys are in the fold, I think we will be better on the defensive line. Now, do we have a Jalen Carter level difference maker? I still don't think we have that. But if you have a couple of guys of the caliber that we have by committee, we can be better than we were last year. And that's all we need to be. Like with our offense this year, and the experience we have now at inside linebacker, some of those guys that aren't going to be true freshmen like C.J. Allen and Raylan Wilson. I know Pop moved on, but you still got Smile Munden. We're going to be better on defense, and I think we're going to be better on the defensive line. It's going to be a big part of, if we win another national championship this year, I think that's going to be a big part of it. I think we're going to be better, and Christen Miller absolutely is going to be a major factor when it comes to that. So that's my 2 cents on Christen Miller. I know not everyone agrees on that, and that's totally fine. I did discover, again, that not everyone is as high on Christen Miller as I am. I think the guy's really good. And y'all who've been listening for a long time, you know that.
Man, is there going to be some property destroyed tonight. 26-21. Dogs on top.